You're standing in front of the meat section, and your brain does what it always does. It looks for shortcuts. One package says uncured, another says smoked, another says all natural. Then the loudest label of all appears in your head: processed. And suddenly the choice feels moral instead of practical. Here's the twist. The kind of processing people warn you about is not the same as simply cutting, freezing, or grinding meat. Those are handling steps. The processed meat most health guidelines mean is something more specific. Meat designed to survive time by curing, salting, smoking, fermenting, or preservatives. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. The real confusion isn't meat, it's language. Processed sounds modern, like machines and factories and lab coats. But the word itself is simpler than its reputation. It just means changed. That's why it causes so much confusion. Two people can say processed meat and be talking about entirely different things: freshness, additives, industry, guilt, while thinking they agree. So for a moment, let's do what this channel does best. Slow down and name the thing. Not to defend it, not to attack it, just to see it clearly, the way you see a street sign after wiping fog off the glass. In everyday speech, almost all food is processed somehow. Cooking is processing. Drying is processing. Freezing is processing in the broad sense. But when nutrition guidelines say processed meat, they usually mean a narrower category. Meat that has been preserved or transformed, cured, salted, smoked, fermented, or treated with preservatives, so it lasts longer and becomes a distinct product. That narrower meaning is the one people argue about. And to understand it, we have to travel backward, to a world where time was the real enemy. Before refrigerators, time ran the kitchen. Imagine a kitchen with no hum of cold air, no freezer drawer, no plastic seal that promises fresh for days. Just meat, warm air, and the quiet clockwork of microbes doing what microbes do. In that world, meat wasn't just food. It was a deadline. If you couldn't eat it today, you needed a way to carry it into tomorrow. And that need, more than taste, more than convenience, created processed meat. Picture a traveler days from the next market, or a fishing village that lands more than it can eat in one night, or a household facing winter. The question isn't, how do we make this perfect? It's, how do we keep this from disappearing? Salt was the first tool. It pulled water out of the meat, making the surface a difficult place for bacteria to thrive. Smoke was another. It dried the outside and layered protective compounds onto the meat like a thin, invisible coat. Wind and sun helped too, patiently removing moisture. And in some cultures, fermentation became a controlled partnership with bacteria. Not rot, but rules. Processed meat didn't begin as indulgence. It began as planning. It was humans learning to store life in a form that could travel across seasons, across oceans, across uncertainty. The definition that ends most arguments. Now we can define it without drama. Processed meat, in the usual guideline sense, is meat intentionally preserved or transformed by curing, salting, smoking, fermenting, or added preservatives to extend shelf life and create a stable characteristic flavor and texture. Notice what's missing. Cutting a steak into strips doesn't redesign its lifespan. Grinding beef into patties doesn't automatically preserve it. Freezing mostly slows spoilage. It can change texture, yes, but it doesn't turn raw meat into a cured or smoked product with a built-in long life. So the boundary is not touched by humans versus untouched. The boundary is purpose. and the purpose is time. The hidden line, when time becomes part of the design. Here is the mental shortcut that makes the meat aisle feel less like a maze. Processing begins when time becomes a design feature. Fresh meat is a race against time. Processed meat is a negotiation with time. It's meat modified so tomorrow doesn't steal it as easily. This is also why factory-made is not a reliable test. You can cure meat at home with salt and patience, and it is processed meat. You can buy factory-packed raw chicken, and in the narrow sense, it is still unprocessed meat. Location is a story. Intention is the definition. Once you see that line, the classic methods fall into place. 4 ways to bend time, each with its own personality. 4 ways humans bent time, and why they taste the way they do. Curing is preservation with a signature. Salt, often paired with nitrites or nitrates, helps prevent certain dangerous bacteria and stabilizes that familiar pink color people associate with ham and bacon. It also creates a flavor that feels instantly recognizable. Not just salty meat, but cured meat. Smoking is preservation wearing perfume. Smoke dries, protects, and leaves behind a deep aroma that turns survival into craving. That's why smoked meats appear across cultures that never met. They were solving the same time problem, and the solution happened to smell wonderful. Salting is the blunt instrument that works. By drawing out moisture, it makes the environment hostile to microbes. It's the original refrigerator, built from nothing but crystals and patience. Fermentation is the most surprising, because it sounds like spoilage until you add one word: controlled. When controlled, beneficial bacteria shift the chemistry of the meat, creating acidity and stability, along with tangy complexity. When not controlled, it's simply rot. Traditional fermented sausages are time-guided by rules. All 4 methods share one idea. They change the meat's relationship with water, microbes, and oxygen, so time moves slower. Modern labels and long ingredient lists. Then we step into the modern supermarket, and the ancient story meets modern packaging. This is where the word processed starts feeling like a trap. You might see uncured and assume not processed. But often uncured means the curing agents came from a different source, like plant-based nitrates, rather than a direct addition of sodium nitrite. The technique is still preservation and transformation. The label is describing the route, not the destination. And you might see an ingredient list that looks like a chemistry set. Phosphates, antioxidants, binders, sugars, flavor enhancers. It helps to remember one gentle reframing. Ingredients often have job titles. Some keep moisture consistent. Some stabilize color. Some slow rancidity. Some make the texture slice the same every time. A job doesn't automatically mean harmless, but it does mean intentional. Modern processing often trades simplicity for predictability. Ancient methods were effective but variable. Industrial methods aim to control variability, so the product tastes the same, stores the same, and behaves the same every week of the year. Why we still reach for it. If refrigerators are everywhere, why hasn't processed meat faded into history like the telegraph? Because it doesn't just survive time. It also solves modern life. It's ready when you're tired. It's stable when your schedule isn't. It can travel from factory to store to lunchbox without falling apart. And it concentrates flavor in a way fresh meat often doesn't, because curing and smoking are basically shortcuts to deep. It's also often cheaper for a practical reason. Many processed meats use trimmings and less celebrated cuts that might otherwise be wasted. You're not just buying meat, you're buying a way to use more of the animal. And then there's culture, the part that doesn't fit neatly into nutrition headlines. Chorizo, salami, lapchong, tocino, corned beef, jerky. These aren't just products. They're maps of place and climate. Hot regions learn to dry and salt. Mountain towns learn to ferment. Coastal villages learn to preserve a catch that arrived all at once. That doesn't make every version ideal, and it doesn't make it evil. It makes it human. A food built from constraints, carried forward by taste. The 5-second test you can actually use. If you want a simple rule that fits in your pocket, use this. If the meat was changed to survive longer, not just handled, portioned, or frozen, it's processed meat in the usual guideline sense. And you can test it fast. Frozen raw chicken breast? Not processed meat. Plain ground beef with nothing added? Not processed meat. Bacon, ham, jerky, salami, hot dogs, smoked or cured sausages? Processed meat. Canned meats built for long shelf life? Processed meat. This won't solve every edge case, but it will solve the feeling of guessing. A story about time, not fear. Processed meat is not primarily a story about factories. It's a story about humans refusing to be ruled by decay. Salt and smoke were early technologies, as meaningful in their era as refrigeration is in ours. They turned short-lived freshness into something portable, shareable, and durable. Understanding that doesn't tell you what to eat. It simply returns something modern life often steals: calm. When you understand a label, it stops being a spell. It becomes information. And here's the gentle payoff. When a word becomes clear, your attention becomes free. You can notice the real trade-offs: taste, convenience, tradition, frequency, without letting a single label do all the thinking for you. Curiosity turns into understanding, and understanding turns into a calmer kind of choice. That's the small journey we take on this channel, from a simple question in an ordinary aisle to a deeper picture of how humans live with time. And maybe that's the quiet philosophy inside a package of bacon or a stick of salami. We spend so much time trying to freeze the world, our food, our photos, our moments, because time keeps taking things. Processed meat is one small human answer to that fact, a way of saying, not yet. Once you can name what you're looking at, you can choose without panic, without purity games, without turning dinner into an identity. You can choose like a person who sees the system and still enjoys a simple meal. If this changed how you see processed meat, tell me what surprised you most in the comments. And if you enjoy stories hidden inside everyday labels, consider subscribing for the next small secret.